Hello, welcome to another edition of Close Mode, the Enterprise Sales Show. I'm Brian Dietmeyer, CEO of Close Strong. And today we are lucky to be here with Liz Heiman. Liz is the CEO and Chief Strategist for Regarding Sales. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, Regarding Sales helps founders create a strategy, clear strategy, implement. I love this, a knowable, doable B2B sales operating system to achieve predictable sales revenue. Liz also runs the Sales SOS podcast, as I recall,
Yeah.
and you may or may not have spent some time in a company with the name Miller Heiman, as I recall.
I did.
I thought you did. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So we had a chat last week, and we started talking about sales operating systems, and you just said a bunch of stuff that made me want to dig into it some more. And the thing you said that was pretty powerful is a lot of leaders really don't understand how to run a sales organization, and I started thinking of that. Thought there's probably some truth to that, and then the question is why. So, but my first question is, you talked about not knowing how to run a sales organization is not having a really strong sales operating system. I think intuitively we all kind of get what that is, but I'd like to hear Liz's version of the kind of major elements of an effective sales operating system.
Sure. And before I start, I just want to say, how would you even learn how to run a sales organization, right?
Yes.
So there's this whole process missing of teaching people how to do this. But
no, but by the way, Liz, I just want to stay on that for a second, because as I was saying that, that's kind of what came to mind, that one of the root causes is maybe the way we come up, right? The best salespeople get the leaders' jobs, and I people on the podcast often hear me refer to Bill Marriott, because I worked for Marriott for a bunch of years, and he had a saying, many of them, but one was, the very things that made you successful are the things that will lead to your failure in your next position, and all that comes to mind when you say that. So I do think that's important.
well, and if you think about, the head of a company is always the head of sales.
Yeah.
No matter how far they think they're removed from sales, they're always the head of sales. And very few heads of companies come out of sales.
Yeah.
So how
Hmm.
would you even know these things, right? So let's talk about a sales operating system. What is it? Why
Yep.
do you need one? So when I think about a sales operating system, there are really three critical parts. The first is that you have a strategy. There's a strategy that says, here's where we're going as a company. Here's what the sales team needs to support it. You have a lead generation strategy. You have a sales strategy. You have these strategies that are going to guide activity. And one of my favorite ways to think about it is to say, activity without strategy is chaos. So a
Hmm.
lot of people want to start with tactics and activity, but what you really want is activity that supports the goals that you have. So that's the first thing, is getting all those strategies in place. The second thing is really setting the systems and the processes in place. What
Yep.
is the process that people have to go through in order to purchase from us? What is the buyer journey? What is the seller journey? How did those two connect? Does our sales process support the buyer journey in a way that makes it easy for them to buy? And what are the activities? What are the questions? What are the collateral or tools that are needed at each stage of that strategy to be successful? And
Yeah.
the next question is, how does that align with your CRM? Or more importantly, how does your CRM align with what your sales process is? And then I think the third component is management. We sort of manage by reaction. We spend a lot of time putting out fires, reacting to whatever's going on, and proactive selling, proactive leadership uh, are sort of missing. And so, do you have the agendas and the critical pieces that are required to manage and support your sales organization? Those are the three critical pieces for me.
You said a couple of things that, by the way, I love activity without a strategy is chaos. Like that. That's the great thing about sayings like that, right? Like the one I mentioned from Bill Marriott, because they tend to sum up stuff really quickly. And it occurred to me while you were saying that we're so action driven in sales that sometimes it's like, yeah, stop thinking about stuff and go do stuff. And sure, but we might want to think about stuff a little bit up front. Yeah, the other thing you mentioned was the kind of buyer seller journey coming together. And years ago in business school, and you may be familiar with it, there's an old HBR article called "Staple Yourself to an Order." And the argument is that any CEO, to the point you made earlier about them maybe not coming up in sales, staple yourself to an order and find out what it's really like, which, I think would be brilliant. You just brought that article back to mind. So, my next question had to do about, why is there a lack of strong general management? I think we started with that one, which is how people come up and how they get promoted and what brings them into the job. Anything you want to add, sort of in terms of root causes beyond simply their career pathing?
I think, yeah, career path is important, but I think there's also this. There's a couple of things. I have been in a sales organization, so I have experienced what somebody else did in leadership, but they weren't
Yeah,
necessarily a good leader.
yeah,
So I'm going to build my model of leadership either on what someone else did or base it on not doing what somebody else did. But neither of those are strategies that say, here's what I want to accomplish with my team. What is the best way to get my team to achieve those things? So, from the very top and from the investors, we get pounded on numbers, 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 closes, closes, closes. We don't really get the freedom to focus on the entire funnel, the
yeah,
entire salesperson, like the salesperson, not just what they're closing this week, but what is their journey? What are their missing skills? What are their strengths? How do we leverage those? So we're missing all of these pieces because we focus on what's closing right now, what's closing this week, what's closing this quarter. Are we going to hit our numbers, hit our numbers, hit our numbers? If you are always focused on how you're going to hit your numbers right now, you're never focused on what it will take to hit your numbers next year.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I think that's one of the biggest gaps is we don't learn how to manage the entire sales process and to support the salesperson to achieve what they need to achieve. We just pound numbers until we have beaten our salespeople to death and they don't
yeah.
like it anymore and they don't want to work for us anymore.
Yes. Yeah, and it's again, you keep saying things that which is fun, by the way. It makes me think of more things. We back to this like lack of general management skills, and I by the way, anyone younger than me is 12, so I was made. They might be 30, but they're 12 in my mind. So I was 12 when I was handed a VP of National Account Sales job at Marriott. And I think maybe I I went through some leadership skills, but it was more the soft leadership skills training. Like what just occurred to me as you were talking through that, and I'm sure I'm prototypical for people. I got in there because I was a rock star sales guy, and but no general management skills. And everything, and yeah, I feel like and I'm sure there's curricula out there somewhere, but that's one thing that occurs to me is that, you know, you, we're just not prepping people in this way for everything you've talked about for a sales operating system. We're not prepping them if they don't walk in with that bias.
And we tend to think also in smaller companies, we're going to hire a sales leader who comes out of a big company that has great
Yeah,
experience. They
yeah,
come out of Google or HP or, whatever. And we get them there and we think they're going to know what to do. They're going to know how to build and grow this sales organization that's very immature. But in fact, they're used to running sales organizations that are very mature and that
yeah,
they're totally different. So how mature is your sales organization and what is your experience with maturity level in the organization you've been in? And there's a huge mismatch. If I'm running a startup or a really fast growing mid-sized company and I'm hiring people that come from very mature sales organizations with all the bells and whistles, they don't have the skill set to do what I need them to do.
yeah. So I wonder, and you and I talked about this a little bit as we were prepping for this, like who, excuse me, who should own the sales operating system? And I was asking you about, RevOps. I mean, this is a cross-functional strategy, it sounds like. So RevOps jumped out to me. Is it the CSO? Is it the sales VP? Or is it a grayer answer to that? Who's ultimately responsible?
Well, I'm going to back up and say the very first thing is that if you expect your sales leader or your sales ops people to hit your goals when you do not have a clear business strategy, then you're a fool.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not going to happen. So we
Hmm.
think just throw a number at my sales leader and they'll throw a number at their salespeople, and this will somehow result in what we need. Well, it might result in the numbers that you need, but it might not result
Hmm.
in the verticals, the products, whatever it is that you really need to achieve for the company to go the direction you want it to go. So the first thing is the company leadership is the first place, and the buck stops there essentially. Then second is, it's sales ops, rev ops responsibility to figure out what systems need to be in place in order to support a strategy. So the sales leader is responsible for the sales strategy. So this is a marriage between the two, but it is the sales leader's job to make sure we're hitting goals. It's the sales
Yeah.
leader's job to make sure the salespeople are successful. And RevOps comes in to support the strategy with the systems and processes that we
Okay.
need.
So kind of another pop-up question that just came to mind. If someone's in a leadership role and you're hearing this going, okay, wait, maybe I've got some gaps. I mean, one way to fill that gap is to hire a consultant, one of us, to come in and help build these things. That's for sure. But are there any sort of self-help tools if someone's hearing this? Like, what can they do to beef up their sales operating system, their strategic chops?
I think there's so many really good books out there
Yeah.
that you can read. I think one of the first ones is not a sales book. It's the E-Myth Revisited, to getting you to start thinking about what is process.
Okay.
What is process? What is systems? How do we define all of this? It's a great book to start with.
And can you say that name again? The E-Myth, you said?
The E-Myth
Okay.
Revisited.
Okay.
And I know the author's name, but it has just slipped out of my brain.
Of
But
course.
it's a really good starting point. And then if you want to look at what are all of the things that people are writing about sales, what is Seth Godin writing? What is Jeb Blunt writing? I could name a dozen other people who are writing books talking about sales and the different components of sales that you need to have in place to be successful. The other thing is to listen to how other people did it. So I'm gonna promote my sister here for a second. So Liz Heiman, who's my sister, has a great podcast where she talks to sales leaders about
Mm-hmm.
how they built their organizations and what mistakes they made and what went wrong. So most podcasters are talking to company leaders about this, but Alice is talking to them really about sales. So looking for places like that where you can start to learn how
Yep.
it works.
No, I think that's a that's a brilliant intro too. And you're right, books. I think Alice's podcast is a great idea, because I'm trying to find ways again for those of us sitting here going, "Oh crap, I might have some of these gaps." What can I do like tomorrow? Like if you hear this, so what would you? I'm a big fan of kind of diagnostics, like diagnosing before we prescribe. It's been in my DNA forever, and as a seller, but yeah, how would you diagnose issues with your sales operating system? Like, what's the low hanging fruit? Again, if someone's listening slash watching and wondering, how do I know if mine's broken? Where would you go first, second, third?
So the first is looking at the fires that you're putting out. So if you talk to most sales
Hmm.
leaders, they will tell you, and sales managers, they will tell you they spend the majority of their day putting out fires. Well, if you're spending your day putting out fires, every time you put out a fire, instead of looking at the salesperson and getting angry because they didn't do what you wanted them to do, look at the process that enabled them to make that mistake.
Yep.
How are your processes supporting them to success? Stop blaming and start looking for, what do we need to do? Now, if you have a salesperson that, regardless of the rules and regardless of what you set up, they keep messing up, then there might be a problem with that salesperson. But my guess is you're finding the same kinds of problems happening across all your salespeople, which means there's a gap in your sales process and support. The second thing is to look at your CRM, look at your sales funnel. What do you see when you look at it? Is there consistency or is there inconsistency? Does everybody have a different definition for every word, for every stage? Do your stages represent what the buyers are going through? Are you having consistent Velocity, does it take the same amount of time for most sales to go through the funnel for all of your sellers and all of your industries? Are they different? Are things getting stuck in certain places? Is there a lot of junk in there that people are afraid to throw away because there's no leads coming in? Like, those are the two places I would start.
Okay. And how about metrics that are moving, that are like the lagging indicators that something upstream is busted?
So I think we first have to back up and figure out what are we measuring. And most companies, when I go in and look at the KPIs, they don't necessarily measure what matters.
Hmm.
So if you're setting up KPIs or whatever term you want to use today for those success measures, I would start with the funnel. If I understand the math of the company, and I'm sorry, some people will tell you there is no sales math, just sell better and everything will be fine.
Right.
That's a nice idea. I wish it were true, but to date, I have not met a company that doesn't have some sort of loss through the process, right? So the first people you talk to, you maybe talk to 10 people and one of those actually closes. So if you're prospecting, what is the math from prospecting to close? If you begin to understand that, and if you begin to watch the velocity, now you can set KPIs and say, do you have enough leads in the various stages of the funnel in order to hit your goal in 6 months, if you have a 6-month sales cycle or 9 months or 12 months or whatever that is. The second is velocity. Is everything getting stuck in your funnel? Is there a bunch of stuff stuck and qualify that is never going to turn into business that you're not throwing away? So when you're setting your KPIs, look at, what does the sales math look like? What does the process look like? And how do I measure progress along the way in order to identify problems early on?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm really lucky to have talked to a bunch of CROs and a bunch of RevOps folks, and I just heard a CRO say the other day, velocity. That's my number one thing. But the other thing that I keep hearing too is the sort of crazy speed of change with technology, and it occurs to me, this has come up to me a couple of times as you've been talking, that managing a really good sales operating system is a very, very, very complex tech stack. and I feel like we haven't talked about that yet. That isn't that, like, you talked a little bit about CRM, but I feel like figuring that out, underdoing or overdoing that, it can hurt or help a system to get it just right.
I think a lot of companies are overdoing it.
Yep.
That's the first thing. If your salesperson has to go to 6 different tools in order to do their job, it's time to think about how to make that easier. If you want your salespeople to use the CRM, keep them in the CRM. And then any tool that they use should be aligned with their CRM so that they can easily work in there. I think that's one of the first things. I think the second thing is that this tech stack is going to change faster now than it has. It's been changing so fast, but now with the introduction of AI and what really works and what really doesn't. I mean, it's really, really important to understand that AI only uses the data that exists to create suggestions or emails or whatever it is that you want that to create. If your data pool isn't good, then the outcomes are not going to be good. And if the salespeople aren't using the CRM properly, then the data pool is a mess.
Yeah.
So, you think AI is the magical message, the magical thing that's going to solve all your problems. There's no magical thing. There's never been a magical thing. There will never be a magical thing. It's a tool that will help you if it's based on data that's accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Two reactions to that. As a CEO of a sales tech startup, I see the same thing, and I tend to think of it as point products, and we start mapping out like what our customers. There's all these little pieces, and in and of themselves, they're kind of cool, and I feel like that's what's come into the market. Whether it's forecasting stuff or content generation or whatever it is, it's all these little bits and pieces, and I feel like that's part of the problem, is the lack of holistic solutions. And it's interesting too, because one of my partners sent me an article from Gartner the other day, and because we were having this discussion with our CTO about when is AI. And we were talking to an investor, and we have AI in our solution, and the investor is like, well, how long before your thing has efficacy? Is it going to take you a year to train the LLM? So I went back to our CTO and was like, wait, it's a really gray area. Are we AI? And he's like, well, we're building something that kind of doesn't exist, that I haven't built before, and it's modern software sprinkled with AI. And lo and behold, about 2 weeks later, one of my partners, Patrick, stumbled on a Gartner article. I think this is helpful for people. I've been sharing it as much as I can. Gartner calls what we're building, we didn't know we were building, an intelligent application. And their argument, forget anything I'm doing. You can go to Gartner's article on it. I think it's called like Demand Growing for Intelligent Apps. And intelligent apps are modern software that have AI sprinkled in them to make them super smart at different pieces. And the efficacy is earlier. And like I said, I've been sharing this as much as possible because I think for those of us dealing with the issues you just talked about, that it's neither just software or AI, but it seems to be now this matrix of the two. So yeah, I just went, if you haven't heard of it, Liz, yourself, I would take a look, because it's
I
pretty
will.
cool, emerging tech, or blending of a couple techs. So yeah, this is really helpful, and I especially like the indicators of, because that came to me right away, the indicators of what's broken, because I've heard people saying those, right, the same problem over and over again, or velocity, or whatever it is, that it's like, okay, the systemic problem, right? You're looking at this tactical issue and it's more systemic, and that'll tell you your operating system is broken. I love the idea of how to get yourself skilled up to run a better one. This is kind of an aside, but in our pre-interview, this is sort of back to those like things people say that are quippy that make sense. And so we're going to jump down into tactics of selling right now. You said something to me, because one of my questions was, what frustrates you in selling today in general? And you said, my guy said, and
Right.
it struck me. I feel like it was one of those things, once again, like the chaos thing you said earlier, that it's like, that's really meaningful. So talk to me about my guy said. Why is that a problem?
Well, the first thing is understand that Gardner says that
Yeah.
the number of people involved in a sale has gone from 5 to 15, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
whatever the newest number is. So
Right.
if there are 15 people involved in a buying decision, if it's a complex business to business sale that's going to take several months and impact the company, make
Yep.
changes in the company that you're selling to, there's more than one person involved. But what happens is our marketing team directs the marketing toward a person who goes on the website and does the research, and then we hand that person to the salesperson, and that person is the person who's supposed to be going out and doing the research and picking some vendors and making some recommendations.
Yeah.
They have, in many cases, no authority to make a decision, but the salesperson is not given permission by that person to talk to anybody else, or that person convinces them they've got everything under control. All they have to do is talk to them, and my guy at
Yeah.
this company is going to direct me through this sales process. So why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because this person usually has very little authority. It's a problem because this person does not know what everybody else is thinking.
Yeah.
It's a problem because there are other people, other salespeople, who are accessing people higher in the organization, like the VP or the CEO or the person who can make or break the sale. And so you're sitting back and waiting for your guy to bring it up to the CEO. My guy said they're going to talk about it on Thursday. My guy said
Yeah.
he'd call me after they have the meeting. My guy said the CEO really likes it. My guy said we're probably going to win this deal. And I don't know how many deals have been lost because my guy was wrong.
Yeah.
And so whenever I am working with a salesperson and they just keep giving me the same person's name, I always ask them, and who else have you spoken with?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and it's single threading, right? And we all know it's a problem. We all know that no decision's on the rise because our customers are struggling with the complexity of their decision process, given committee buys and all that stuff. And the single threading is still an issue. I can, quite frankly, think to a couple of our deals where we weren't threaded enough. And the my guy. So it just we should banish my guy said from as opposed to. By the way, I have a friend of mine who's a software engineer who's starting like a home improvement fix it fix-it company, and his tagline is, "I got a guy." Now that's different.
Right. There you go.
For my buddy Jeff, I got a guy. Yeah, your plumbing's broken. I got a guy. I can fix that for you. So this is it's been really fun. It was fun to prep for this, and it was fun to deliver it. But it's a really important distinction, I think, at the highest level about how we're preparing folks for these sales leadership roles, especially with the complexity of the tech stack out there and running a sales operating system. So yeah, you've been really, really, really generous with your time and your ideas, and it's completely appreciated. And speaking of that, like, there's part of me that wants a visual of a strong sales operating system, and I'm certain you have one of those. So if you would, if you send that to me, then I'll put it in the link once we start pushing out, because that's, I personally want to see, like, I get it, but I want to see the image of that. So again, thank you so much. This has been a blast, and I look forward to getting it out to folks.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great talking with you.
Should we let